Welcome to the Luna Holistic Podcast. I'm your host, Geneva Robbins, and every month on this podcast, we'll talk about Reiki, as well as answering your questions on all things spiritual. We are gratefully located in Calgary in Treaty 7 territory. Thank you all and welcome to the show. Welcome to the Luna Holistic Podcast. My name's Geneva Robbins, and I'm here today with Rita Reddy. Hi, Rita.
Hello.
I'm so glad you could make it here today. Rita is a Reiki master and Trilotherapist here in Calgary with me at Luna Holistic. And today we're going to talk about a whole pile of things connected to spirituality and Reiki. Before we dig into that, we'll start with a little collective breath of gratitude. So just a little mini meditation. If you happen to be driving, you can skip ahead or just, don't close your eyes or anything. But otherwise, if you're in a nice, safe space, you can gently close your eyes and take a few inner breaths. Just settling in, letting all of your energy regroup and reground. Feeling a sense of gratitude and wonder for the planet that we are sitting on. Feeling the energy below you rise up to greet you from the center of the earth to support you. Rising up through your body and out the top of your crown and radiating all around you like a beautiful rainbow, completely held in safety, love, and support, yet also feeling free to expand. Sending some gratitude to all of the plant life that surrounds you, to the air, that fresh air the plants create, to the animals and birds and insects that live all around you, the life within everything. And sending out some gratitude to all of the people that inhabit your worlds. And of course, gratitude for your own heart for being here with us today. Thank you for joining us. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. That's nice. How is that for you, Rita?
Oh, yeah, that was great.
Good. Yeah. We've got some nice, juicy questions to explore and ponder. Before we jump straight into that, maybe we can start with what drew you into Reiki?
Yes, I love this question because I was curious. I was in a healing kind of journey, and then I was meeting all these people who knew about many different things like Reiki and Trilotherapy and other therapies. Yeah, in the circle that I was in, I came across some people who were doing Reiki on each other, and I asked them what that was, and they kind of showed me, like what it was. And then I was curious. So I found your course. I can't even remember how. Maybe it was through Kim Johnston. Yeah, I just signed up because I was curious about what Reiki was and how I fit in. Because most of the people were telling me, oh, you'd be really good at Reiki because you're already like tapping into things that you can tap into way better with Reiki training. And so I was like, cool, well, what even is like what's Reiki training? And so I looked into all different kinds and I found yours. And I really liked the way it was set up, like with 10 sessions of like going through your chakras. And I had just gone through another course about chakras, and I was really like on this like path of learning about that. And so I loved how your workshops were set up. And so I signed up for the first one. And then of course I was in. I was hooked. And so I wanted to know everything about it. I wanted to become a Reiki healer as well. And so here I am.
Yay!
Yeah.
You are a Reiki master
Yeah.
and a good one. And one of the
Ooh,
first couple of students I ever taught too. So it's
yeah.
been really, really cool to get to go on this ride with you, which is awesome. Yeah. That's so great. I love it. I love the winding paths that we find our way
Mm,
into spirituality. And I
I
find
know.
it's like a little path that's sort of dotted with these gems, and you just get led from courses to classes to books to you get the resources you need all along the way, which I think is amazing. So,
Yes.
yeah. So
Totally.
great. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. One of the things that we were talking about, and something that we've talked about quite a bit, you and I have talked about this a lot, and your take on this has really helped me, which actually comes from your trilotherapy background, which maybe before I ask the question, you can just briefly like what is trilotherapy and how do you use it to help yourself and help other people?
Trilotherapy is created by Zen master Nissim Aman. I met him in Calgary, but he lives in Tel Aviv in Israel. He basically invented trilotherapy based on a bunch of his own training in Zen Buddhism and meditation. And he uses elements of his learning about Western psychology and then Eastern philosophies. And he brought them together in this program called Trilotherapy, which is basically like another set of workshops. It's a retreat based program, but at Luna Holistic, obviously, I teach it as well on a one on one basis. The main idea is that you have a center self that you're born with and you come into every life with. And then you have these two children that are like your rational brain and your emotional brain, your emotional mind. Those three aspects work together to kind of guide you through decisions in life. And
Mm.
our job in Trilotherapy is to help you figure out what place you're making decisions from and kind of get you to making decisions from the center, your center self, which is always your true self and your highest self. Yeah, your two inner children, we call them, your rational mind and your emotional mind are they create your personality and they take in all the information and process it. And then, yeah, you're the one who's going to be making the decisions. And sometimes we're making decisions and allowing this child to make this decision for us. But the idea is to like parent ourselves and parent these children to help us make the best decisions for our lives and figure out like where we're coming from and why we are deciding certain things.
I love it. It's so great. I find it's quite transformational and it shifts your perspective with these sort of beautiful analogies, probably drawing from the Zen Buddhism aspect, where you have these very simple, seemingly simple on the surface things, but they have very, very deep roots. And they can, I find when, we've worked together on a few sessions, that it helps really flip my script. And like you said, like it get me from my two little bratty children that want to like have they're both throwing tantrums and fighting with each other and get me back into the center where I can actually just care for them in a loving way with compassion and sort of give them what they need without giving into them, just like bratty
Yeah,
little
totally.
children are just, they just have needs that are unmet, and meeting them in a way that is nourishing rather than addictive. you know,
Yes,
like the
totally.
toddler in Superstore throwing a fit about not getting candy when really they need a nap, right? So it's like
Yeah,
coming from that wisdom place, you give them the nap, you don't give them the candy, and from an
100%.
adult perspective, you go for a walk, you don't have beer. or
Exactly.
whatever example
Yeah,
of numbing you might use. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. So the question that comes in from many people who are dealing with a lot, as we all are, because just our whole world changed and is changing again and changing again. And it just seems like a constant thing dealing with outer world changes, but then also inner world changes as we sort of adapt to things like losing jobs and changing relationships, and all kinds of things are kind of up for people. It's just sort of life these days. But for you, Rita, what are some tools that you use to deal with this enormous amount of change and maybe the feelings that come along with it, like grief and loss and an ability to let go? Like, what works for you, or what's your go-to thing in your back pocket when you're in that
Yeah.
mucky change business? Ugh, who likes change?
Oh, nobody likes change unless it's the good parts of change. Change has
Right.
so many good parts, and then when they have the bad parts come around, which are always going to come around, that's when things get like really hard. That's what we call change sometimes. Like we misname change to be like the gross parts. But my main tool, I think, that has been coming up so much for me lately is the apple tree cycle. And it's a Trilotherapy workshop that Nisim taught us. And I teach myself pretty much all the time. It's basically going through the stages of an apple tree from
Mm-hmm.
the seed being fertilized and the gestation period of a seed to the growth and the plant coming out. Growth is the next stage, and then fruiting. So, all the fruits of your labor, and then the inevitable death of the cycle, and then a rotting of the cycle, and then back to that gestation period where something new comes about. And, everything goes through these cycles, even tiny little mini ones. Like you might go through like 10 of them a day, like it's just basically the beginning, the middle of an end of anything that's going on, whether it be a relationship or going to the store and getting groceries.
Yeah. We tend to, but not always, like the beginning parts of the cycle. Like when the little sprout is happening, it's like you can see, oh, there's forward progress, like things could change. That'll be amazing. And then the growth part, you get to see like how putting things into action are expanding. And then in the fruiting stage, it's like you're starting to get to enjoy some of the things that you've created and put into motion. But then there's that rotting and death stage where,
Exactly.
in the apple tree, it's like the apple's fallen off of the branch and is now in the process of letting go and returning to the earth, which is like the fertilization. And so that's usually when we feel like poop.
Yeah, because we're turning into poop.
We're turning into
but
poop.
but it's also so beautiful because you know that poop is nourishing and it's food for the seed, and that's what we need. And that's like there's beauty in it, even though it's like the stinky gross part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just thought of something. I think in your book, Secret Art of Happiness, you talk
Mm.
about the signs of spring. Is that where
Yes.
you talk about?
Yes.
Yeah. So signs of spring are so wonderful. And that's where the little sprouts come out. And
Yeah.
everyone loves that. When you're growing
Yeah.
a plant, like that's your favorite part. You're like, it's happening.
It's
I
happening.
have a
Yeah.
plant. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that signs of spring is like, we do that. For me, I do that process, which is basically like a gratitude process. You're noticing that even before you see any change happening, you're in an uncomfortable place. You're dealing with the grief and loss and the turmoil, and you're in a maybe even a stuck place and you don't like it. Sort of like the winter season where it's just like there's a snow and ice and it's miserable and I don't like where I am. I'm uncomfortable. But even in those places, there's forward movement and progression. And when you start noticing them, like tiny, tiny little signs that things are turning in your favor, and then really heaping love and gratitude on those things, it can be the fuel that sort of pulls you through the rough parts so that even when I'm feeling at my lowest point, there's some little thing that I can look to that says, this is a temporary state and it's going to get better, which I like the idea of a cycle is that, and that might be with like the way the rational mind likes to think about things, which is very linearly, that it's a line. We have a start, we have a middle, and we have an end. The start and the end never link back up with each other. The end is final, and there's nothing but the abyss of loneliness and terror on the other side of that
Yeah.
death and rotting. And
Yeah.
with a cycle, it's like, no, what's on the other side of that death and rotting is more life and more
Yeah.
growth and more fruits, and then
Yeah.
more death, and then more
Yeah.
life. And it's this life, death, life cycle, which is
Totally.
comes up in one of my favorite books. So the books that, totally changed my life is
Yeah.
Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola
Oh, yeah.
Estes.
Yeah.
And she talks a lot about, she sort of deconstructs fairy tales in this sort of Jungian analysis. And I love, love that book. And she talks a lot about this life, death, life cycle. And so that we don't need to fear sort of these death parts of our lives when there's a feeling of loss or there is actual loss that we have to process, because in that there is beauty, like you had said. And that's also where we get our strength, our courage. Sometimes in the times of hardship and struggle and turmoil is when we come together as a community. We reach out to other people. We
Mm-hmm.
start learning and connecting with our inner resources and our outer resources in new ways that maybe we wouldn't have before all of the change happened. So yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love it's such a neat metaphor for sure.
And I'm really glad you said the thing about winter because also in Neeson's workshop and in Trilotherapy, in the apple tree cycle during the fruiting stage, we can think of things as having seasons. So winter or like spring, summer, fall and winter. And then again, so there the mini cycles are happening, even though, the larger tree is still here, you can see like the different mini cycles happening in the fruiting stage. And that's okay too. And just like you use the apple tree or the apple falling off of the tree rather than the tree dying itself. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a seasonal cycle. And so there is also that. And you can find those in life and in your cycles that are happening.
Yeah, I find it's such a gentle way of looking at it that can help. I find those like reframes really useful to just seeing things from a different angle sometimes can make all of the difference. But yeah, when you get to that like moment though where you're right in it, like when you're in that like moment of discomfort, where do you find that comfortable place with the uncomfortable? you know?
Yeah. So I think having an understanding of what stage you're in. I mean, sometimes, people will sabotage in my diagram in my mind of the apple tree cycle. There's all these exit doors at each stage where we might jump ship. Like, you're in a new relationship and you're going through that growth stage and you're ready for commitment, but you're so afraid of it because there's sometimes these little traumas that come into play that are like, I'm not worthy of that, or I can't commit right now. And you're just like, you jump, you take a perfectly good budding relationship and you might say, I don't deserve that, or I can't have that right now. And you leave and you exit and you fast forward to the death and the rotting. But having that awareness, over time that's what you're doing. I think like sometimes people get these like light bulb moments where they're like,
Mm.
I always leave the relationship at this stage. And things like that, like just noticing the patterns in your cycles and noticing where you kind of have the most trouble. And I mean, I think I was telling you this earlier that most people come to get healing or Reiki or help when, like in therapy, when they're in that death and rotting stage, because those are the grossest parts. And like, that's when you're like, can I handle this? I can't handle this. The positive parts are where, you see the signs of spring and you're growing and you're having fruits of your labor. Like, you're loving the person you just met and you move in together and you get engaged and you're having a wedding. And like, those are such beautiful parts. And like, those are the parts that are even idealized in media and everything. And
Mhm.
nobody loves talking about the breakup and the decline of the relationship, and nobody loves talking about stuff like that. No, but nobody loves being in it. And so understanding the cycle and like that's like and the stage you're in is so important for healing and for making it through to the next, the next relationship or the next business idea or whatever, like
Mhm.
that didn't work out in. And so the part where it's not working out, you can also, once you recognize the cycle, you can jump out at that death stage and be like, nope, I know that this is dead and I'm letting it
Mhm.
go and I'm moving on and I want to start
Yeah.
something new. And sometimes your next cycle is already percolating within your current cycle, and so you can do that. You can like
Yeah.
fast forward things if you are have an awareness about what's happening.
Yeah. The
Mhm.
change that you choose, of
Mhm.
the relationship metaphor, because instead of, seeing it through all the way through its fruit and rotting, it's like you might know, like your center, your core might know at the first date that this is not the fruit you want to be picking, that this isn't
Yeah.
leading you forward. And it can be really scary to say no to somebody or to let somebody down or to end something or step away because we don't want to make them feel bad. We don't want to hurt them. It's uncomfortable for us. Why would we ever leave something that looks so good on paper? And I think we can allow our rational and emotional minds to sort of pull us off our center when we know deep inside what we truly need and want. And turning inward and listening to your inner wisdom is the piece, which is your inner guide knows what part of the cycle you're on and if this is a cycle you need to be on for your soul's growth. you know
Mhm.
and because anything else won't feel right. you know Even if there's discomfort, I think there's, when you're doing something that is meaningful and matters to you, and in whatever capacity, there's joy in every stage. And I like that you talked about the exit points. There's joy in every stage, and there's also terror in every stage,
Yeah.
and and some people might not even want to plant that seed.
Mhm.
Don't even think about things being better, because then I might hope for things to be better, and then my hopes might be dashed, and then it's a very painful place. So don't even start to change anything, because it might turn out badly. So knowing
Yeah.
which part of the cycle stops you,
Yeah.
and that only really bothers us when it sort of bothers us deep inside, is like, no, but I'm longing for that. There's something inside me that maybe wants to write that book, or maybe you want to have children one day, or maybe you don't want to have children one day, and maybe you want to travel the world and explore things, and you don't want a relationship or any of that stuff, but you think you
Yeah.
have to because that's what you've been told to do. So you keep
Mhm.
on hopping out because you don't actually fit in that cycle, and you need to find what calls your own heart and spirit forward. which can represent a big shift and change in,
Yeah.
changing things from the status quo. So maybe you're not an apple tree, maybe you're an orange tree.
Yeah.
And you're not living
Totally.
maybe you're not a tree at all,
Yeah, totally.
some other living being that has
Some
its,
other organic thing
yes,
is what everything is.
yes, maybe you're a fish in the sea and you need to swim to
Yeah.
be in
Or
freedom.
fly, like you're a bird and you want to fly. And that's like you're not rooted in that same sense that a tree is rooted. Yeah, and a
Mm-hmm.
fish too. Like they're not rooted, but they're having these organic experiences and like having this cycle where, yeah, it's true. Like it doesn't fit into the formula. That's a really interesting point too. I was gonna say about exiting too early.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was talking about fast forwarding, you could technically, like you're having a relationship, you've been in it for 20 years and then you jump out and you make a new one with somebody like tomorrow. That's probably too early because you also need to go through sometimes the death and the rotting stage, and sometimes people avoid it. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's really important to know if you're avoiding something or if you're actually aware of like what your needs are during those stages. And yeah, if you're really like processing and allowing your kind of spirit to like heal and become new again and be ready for the new cycle.
So if you do decide to leave early, so at the germination stage, is like, oh, I tried this thing, I sampled a bit of life. This isn't for me, and I know it
Yeah.
isn't. Letting yourself go through the completing the cycle and
Mm.
and knowing that the part of the cycle that we tend to avoid the most is the death and rotting stage. So it's
Yeah.
like letting it rot and letting it turn to compost and letting it getting to the space where you're truly okay with not sampling that bit of life, you know,
Yeah.
and processing that, sometimes it's a processing that by not wanting to sample that bit of life that maybe is part of a cultural norm or a stereotype or whatever it is, that there's another rotting that happens underneath that, which is that by choosing myself, sometimes it puts me at a distance from structures and, traditional supports. And maybe it also makes me stand out a little bit, which puts you out into the wilderness a little bit, which is incredibly uncomfortable, but is also often very necessary when we're going through massive change. You know,
Yeah.
we have to be willing to find our way to our own center. I think of it like with one of the things I share a lot in Reiki is the importance of following your own heart, because even the people that love you the most can't
Hmm.
know the core of your own heart. And
No.
when
Yeah.
they make suggestions, which might be very kind, loving, helpful suggestions, they
Yeah.
only have the capability of recommending what has worked for them or what they've seen work for other people.
Yeah.
And it's not a replacement for following your own guidance and knowing,
Yeah.
and recognizing that when people are offering kind suggestions,
Yeah.
you might have a real reaction. It's like,
Yeah.
stop telling me what to do. And that's okay, like greeting that reaction, because all it is that it isn't in sync with what your heart is telling you to do, but it is in sync with their hearts. And so sometimes what I find is that when people do what they think they're supposed to do, they're the good girl or the good boy or the good person, genderless person, that they do what they feel they ought to do, they should do, rather than the thing that is calling their heart forward, they end up living a life that doesn't fit them. They're fitting in rather than really belonging. And I really love the book Braving the Wilderness by Brene Brown, because she talks a
Mm.
lot about that concept that in order to truly belong, in order to truly feel that peace and harmony, you have to first completely belong to yourself. And when you completely belong to yourself, then when people connect with you, you feel that true connection.
How would you support someone through the gross parts of change or the good parts of change with Reiki? Like, how would we use Reiki to support people through change?
Yeah. What I love about Reiki is that sometimes you can have the awareness, but it still doesn't shift the feeling, because the feelings are get really locked in there and they can be really complex. So there is that sort of embracing and respecting sort of the grief parts of loss, like the grief, the loss, that sort of death and rotting. And sometimes it can be processing actual deaths of people that you know and love. And that represents sort of a very big, massive change that you didn't get to choose, but is part of the inevitable organic nature of our being, is that all things will age and all things will also die. And in that passing away, it creates space for transformation and growth. It's a change in that person's energy from one state to another state. The grief we feel when somebody we love passes is there because we love them. If somebody passing away, but we can also feel that grief when we transition from a job, or a child goes from one grade in school to another grade in school, or switches schools, and we're supporting a kid through, if we're parents supporting a kid through that change, and we can see them basically every day walking further and further away from us, which is difficult, and can bring lots of tears. There's some really huge losses, and there's also many smaller losses. But respecting that passing away, that there's an ending of a cycle, and that the reason that we feel a lot of grief around it is because we care so much. And so it's like in honoring and respecting the feeling. And one of the things that I love about Reiki is that it's really, really soothing, and it's very gentle and supportive, and helps connect you with this sort of eternal, everlasting energy, the energy that supports all things, that's within the fabric of life itself, and is the continuity of the cycles, that it taps us into this eternal yet timeless frequency. And in that frequency, there's this moment of real peace and grace. And with great loss, sometimes it's only that heals it. There's a moment where we let go into the infinite, but it's like we get some comfort and peace with that transition stage, so that we can honor the love that's underneath it, and we can process the pain that's over top of the love. And when we process that pain and trauma, what we're left with is the gifts. We're left with the strength and the resilience and all of the things that we've learned. And we basically, fully process any emotion at its core turns into wisdom. And so then we can take the gifts, take the lessons. What did we learn? And the last cycle through the apple tree cycle. And then we can incorporate that. We can take all of the good experiences. We can hold the love close to our heart. We can hold the lessons and the experience close to us. And then we can let everything else go. We can shed it and let it be released. And that's the other part that's amazing with Reiki, is it helps clear off the stuff that's covering up all of the good stuff, or the nice feeling stuff. And it can sort of safely discharge, and kind of setting it to rest, really, and honoring it. There's this memorializing it, or placing it in a place of respect and love and grace, and letting it go to a place of peace and comfort and acceptance. And that might take many times. There's big things that take a lot to fully process and heal. And just giving yourself that space of like, oh, I'm grieving. I'm grieving this loss, and grieving is okay. It's uncomfortable, but underneath grief is love, and underneath pain is lessons and growth and wisdom. And when I understand the lessons, and when I transform this pain, I will be left feeling whole. I will be in a different place because there's no back. I will be transformed by this process of change, and I will accept and embrace the new me that is now living this new life. And I will move forward day by day with grace and gratitude and strength. And for me, that's what Reiki gives me. I find I can tap into that space where I don't know how, but I just sort of know deep in my core, the part of me that's eternal, that's seen everything. That part knows I will be okay with this. So that's what it is for me. How does that sit with you?
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I thought of something maybe like the rational side of the apple tree cycle is to think of things in fifths. So, if your relationship was 5 years, then one of those years is going to be spent on that death period, and then the next is the rotting period. And if your relationship was 25 years, then 5 of those years are going to be death, and 5 of them are going to be rotting, because 5 was gestation and 5 was growth and 5 was fruit. And you have those 15 years of wonderful change, but what you were saying about the pain being inside of that loss, and like on top of it at the death and the rotting stage, that comes from all of this wonderful, beautiful stuff, the positive stuff, I guess. And yet this is beautiful too. The other piece is like that all of it becomes fertilizer for the next, and it becomes this nourishing fertilizer for the next cycle and the next thing. Yeah, I love that energy that was there, and it's being like released and expressed always, like constantly.
Amazing. Thank you
Um,
so much, Rita, for joining us here today. And yeah, I'm just so grateful that we got a chance to connect and talk about this. Those of you listening will have some of these resources, the books that we love about processing change and all of that, in the show notes. And as always, you can look at lunaholistic.com/resources for some great resources and meditations and courses and whatnot to help you process any of the changes. You can book in Rita for Trilotherapy and Reiki, and we're always here to help you no matter what part of apple tree cycle you happen to be in. We can cheer you on when things are going amazing and let those roots deepen and ripen. And we can also help you process any pain that might popping up, pain, trauma, grief, all of that stuff. You can get a bit of help and soothing and support no matter where you are. You're doing great. You're doing great today. So thank you all. And thanks, Rita.
Thanks, Geneva. Thanks. I always love talking with you.
Thank you for joining us on the Luna Holistic podcast. We're so grateful that you are here. If you've got a question, we'd love to hear from you. Go to lunaholistic.com/podcast and we'll answer you in an upcoming episode. Be sure to subscribe to our show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And also please rate, because you never know where your little 5 stars will go to shine light into somebody's heart today. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.